Welcome to the Jess Larsen Show, where I interview innovators and leaders. Today on the show, I've got Josh Mata. Josh, thanks for doing this.
Pleasure to be here.
I'm going to read your bio and then have you tell me about the high points that I missed. Is that okay?
Sure, of course.
Josh Mata is CEO and co-founder of Coalition, the world's first active insurance company designed to prevent digital risk before it strikes. Josh founded Coalition in 2017, and the company now serves over 130,000 customers and is valued at over $3.5 billion. An entrepreneur from the start, Josh joined Microsoft at age 15, becoming the company's youngest hire. He later played an influential role in founding a web infrastructure and website security company, Cloudflare, as its CXO and head of special projects. Josh earned his AB from the University of Chicago and currently lives in California with his wife and daughter. How'd we get?
You got most of it. Although it's funny how much we've grown since I think we sent that over to you. The company's now worth $5 billion, and we have over 160,000 customers. But who's counting, right?
That's awesome. I will say a couple of high points that I know that I feel like that missed is your time with the CIA and your time at Goldman Sachs.
Yes. It's been a couple years between the two. Absolutely. I'm not sure how much I can say about the former, although I was fortunate enough to join CIA out of high school and worked there while I was a student at the University of Chicago. And of course, as one does, I left CIA and I joined an investment bank, which of course the head of CIA at the time, George Tenet, did as well when he left. Of course, he went to Allen and Company, and I went to Goldman.
So it's funny. We've had some folks on here who've been on cyber teams at the agency before. Actually, the guy who redesigned Norton and sold it to Intel is a former agency guy. How do I put it?
There's a number of us floating around.
Penetrating foreign governments.
Yeah, I definitely tell people that I'm much better at breaking into networks as opposed to defending them. So this is perhaps a little bit why we decided to found an insurance company, but I'm sure we'll get to that.
I have so many questions, but let's kind of go way back. Where did you grow up and what did your parents do?
Yeah, so I grew up in Olathe, Kansas, just outside of Kansas City. My father worked for Sprint, a large telecommunications company that's based in Kansas City, and my mother was a nurse growing up in the OB. So lots of child delivery stories growing up.
Oh, my mom was a nurse as well. How would you describe your childhood? What was it like?
Maybe there's a part of me that would say boring. I suppose I grew up in Kansas, so I didn't have anything else better to do other than become an entrepreneur. And I suppose that helped me avoid the 7 a.m. paper route. But in many respects, like idyllic, lots of friends, lived in a wonderful, supportive place. It's a great place to grow up. Cost of living, I can now appreciate that a bit more than I did as a child. Was a little bit better certainly than California, but really enjoyed growing up in the Midwest.
Are there lessons or things from your earlier childhood that you think helped you excel in computers and getting on at Microsoft? I think I heard you were accepted as an intern at 14 and just turned 15 when you went over. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. That's right. That's absolutely right. I mean, certainly I think there's like a lot of Midwestern values in some respects that probably helped get me to where I was. I mean, among them to some degree is humility. Like that was, I think, always a trait that was, really valued among my parents, my peers, my family members, et cetera. And, it really forced sort of a level of curiosity, like sort of by definition, anyone who thinks they already know everything, how can you possibly learn anything new? And so it was really sort of a value, I think, that stoked my curiosity and just desire to continuously try and improve and get better. And so, yeah, look, I taught myself how to program, and I was aided by certainly some family members who are entrepreneurs themselves and had computer networking businesses and the like. So they sort of, directed me in the right direction and then let me loose. I was fortunate to have some grandparents who were academics. And I think my favorite part of visiting them was going to the university bookstore where I could get the student discount on all the, latest software packages and books and whatnot. And sort of, one thing led to another. Started a company, was ultimately recognized by Microsoft. They wrote an article on the company, which led to one of really the founding members of Microsoft, Jeff Rakes, reaching out and a conversation that ultimately led to working there within Jeff's division. He was running Microsoft Business Division at the time, which encompassed Office and a number of other products.
I was listening to maybe a CNBC or one of your other interviews where you talked about something that's very similar. We just had the founder of Route on the show. I don't know if you know them. They basically do insurance for, so like people can
Yeah.
do 2-day delivery like Amazon, but insure. I don't know if
Yep.
you met,
Yeah.
Evan
Yeah.
over
I'm
there,
familiar. I don't know him well. No.
but so, similar to you of like rapid growth into that $1 billion market as a startup. But similar to you running computer businesses as a teenager, having adults not realize he was a teenager. Can you talk about that
Yes.
experience?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, look, I worked out of, all homes in Kansas, of course, have basements because the major natural peril there is a tornado. And so, I was like the prototypical kid in the basement, starting a company, playing video games, doing whatever else. And so, yeah, look, I finally convinced my parents to get a second phone line because I was jamming up the first one, nearly 24 hours a day. This is, of course, back before broadband internet. Um, had my own phone set up, had clients, and yeah, none of them, given the anonymity of the internet, like knew how old I was. Really, the only interaction I had to have through adults was my parents had to sign up for the merchant account to where I could accept credit cards because they weren't willing, the banks weren't willing to do business with a minor. Frankly, even Microsoft, at first struggled. Like when they hired me, they weren't allowed to hire minors. And so technically, I wasn't an employee of Microsoft. I was a contractor. They had to contract for child labor, as I sometimes joke. But, uh, yeah, so look, the internet was very much a great equalizer and allowed me to run a company where the vast majority of my clients had no idea. Perhaps the funniest encounter was when one of my clients, who was actually out in Laguna Beach, not far from where you once lived, uh, said, "Hey, I'm coming to Kansas City and would love to meet with you." And that's where we had to have sort of the awkward confession that, "Hey, we're 14 years old. Is it okay if like my mom accompanies us?" And sure enough, he was totally fine with it. He loved it. So we met it, in the lobby of an Embassy Suites, and he really wanted Kansas City barbecue, which is the best in the country, I might add. And so we all went, my mom included, and went to Gates Barbecue. So, funny stories building a company when you're a teenager.
Okay, so a couple of random questions here, just for my own personal interest. Uh, I have only been to Jack Stacks, and I think it's the best barbecue I've ever had in my life. Everybody seems pretty opinionated about the best barbecue in Kansas City. Do you have one? Do you have a
So
preference?
look, I mean, I'm definitely going to go with you on Jack Stacks, and not just because they're one of our customers. So they purchase cyber insurance from Coalition, but it's phenomenal barbecue. They've actually sent the team here a huge box of it, so they know how much of a fan I am. I also have to say I love Joe's, and Joe's is another great one. So Q39, like those three. I mean, I can't pick just one. Those are going to be the top three.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go back and try the other two. I was thoroughly impressed, and like I knew it was going to be good, but it exceeded
Yeah, excellent.
expectations. Okay, other super random question. As a kid, what was your video game console of choice?
Oh man, I mean, obviously it evolved over time. Maybe that just reveals how long I played video games. But Super Nintendo, obviously, like N64. So I was very much, I think, a Nintendo fanatic up until I had to make the Sony Xbox choice, and I went Xbox.
It's funny. I have Xboxes for my kids now, but my friends all had Super NES. I'm over there playing Street Fighter, but my brother and
Yeah,
I got into Genesis like early on, like maybe 92 or something like that, and just built
yeah.
up the catalog, and
Genesis is great as well. Yeah, although GoldenEye on Nintendo 64, those were the glory days.
right. Um, Before we get to Coalition, um, let's do what's one of your favorite lessons from the agency, one of your favorite lessons from Goldman, one of your favorite lessons from Cloudflare.
Yeah, I mean, look, like across all of those companies, really, like looking back, it was like it's how much purpose matters when building a company, and how much the mission matters. To be perfectly honest, the agency has to be one of the most mission focused employers on the planet. The people, the men and women who serve their country and who go to work every day, oftentimes are not doing it for the largest salary or or otherwise, they're doing it for a sense of purpose and to help others and to see out the mission, protect the United States. And that's powerful, right? I mean, I was able to work with some of the most talented people on the planet, and and they were committed, like to what they were doing. And I don't think I've ever quite been in an environment like that since. Although, Goldman has to be, very close. Like it's a very purpose, mission driven, like team oriented company. So those are big things I'd say I probably took away from those two environments. Cloudflare was always, it's of course like a combination of, what to do and what not to do. Sometimes the biggest lessons are like, oh, don't do that again. And I'd say the things to do is it was solve big problems. Like, it takes as much time to see out a big vision as it does a narrow one. And, the mission of Cloudflare from the beginning was to build a better internet, which seemed somewhat audacious at the time. But, today, a staggering percentage of the world's internet traffic passes through a Cloudflare data center without most people realizing it. The internet is just objectively faster and safer as a result of it. And so that's something that I took with me as well. Solving cyber risk was the initial mission of Coalition, a pretty audacious vision. In terms of the lessons of what not to do, there wasn't always like a clear defined culture. Like there weren't clear values, and the company was growing so fast. We were adding employees so quickly that occasionally we strayed. It made the growth much more complex and difficult, and so certainly that was something I learned in building Coalition, where the first document we ever wrote was actually a culture document. Even before we wrote a business plan. And while many companies don't have business plans anymore, right? It's like you do it on a napkin these days, I hear. We had like an 80-page business plan since we were trying to convince very large reinsurers to give us capital. But the culture document came before that. So those are probably some of the most important lessons I learned.
I don't know as much about Cloudflare, except that obviously they're a huge name in space. But yesterday on the show, we had a 16-year Goldman veteran. She's now in charge of $6 trillion of assets at BlackRock.
Wow.
And she talked about what an asset it was that time that she'd spent at Goldman those years and
Yeah.
people who were there to excel, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
then tomorrow we're having Doug Landon on, who 34-year case officer, former chief of station for the agency, recently came out with a book called The Recruiter. And I I'm down to like the end of the last chapter right now on my morning drive, and it's like very much like exactly what you're talking about, for the mission, not the paycheck, and
Yeah.
and strong personalities, and yet they figure out how to work together and try to make people safe. And you
100%.
know, both of them talk about coming from imperfect organizations who've made mistakes, and yet are able to stay on mission, learn from mistakes, ideally, and do better going forward.
Yeah. Well, it just creates such a huge amount of focus as well. It's like when you can focus the amount of talent that a CIA has or that a Goldman has, focus that on like a very precise mission. It's incredible what a group of people can achieve.
When did you found Coalition?
So it was founded in April of 2017.
So here we are in August 22.
Right.
5 billion in 5 years is pretty impressive, my friend. What are some of the things you attribute that to?
I mean, in many respects, definitely it's a lot to happen in 5 years. And I guess I should reflect and pinch myself that certainly when we founded the company, this is not where we thought we would be in 5 years. But in terms of looking back in hindsight, why are we here? I mean, at some level, it's a combination of the things I mentioned. It's picking a big problem, that organizations have. Like every business is digitizing, even non-businesses, not for profits are digitizing. Places of worship. It's like hard to think of a single for-profit, not-for-profit, or even church or synagogue that isn't dependent on a working computer and internet connection. And of course, when those things fail, it's either very painful or even existential. And it can even be existential to human life if you think about technology used in the healthcare industry or industrial control systems. And so, big problem that we wanted to set out and solve. Very complex for most businesses, other than the largest, to solve it. It's very expensive. Not just to even learn about the problem and understand it, much less to actually go out and purchase all the cybersecurity you need and implement it and the people you need to hire, et cetera. And then it was combine that the vision with the problem with purpose. A lot of the people who are at Coalition came out of the financial services world, came out of the intelligence community, et cetera, came out of the insurance world, of course. And, let's all band together and find a new way to solve this problem. And it turns out that we've scratched that itch, so to speak. Like it has resonated with people. And, we now have 160,000 organizations that have made the decision to, part with certainly their hard-earned income for our services. And so, we're pleased to be able to be there, creating literally a coalition of organizations that we're working with to protect them from the cyber risks that they face.
We've been doing a mini series with a number of folks involved in the Gordian Knot Center at Stanford. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know if you've heard about these guys. That they recently stood up Steve Blank and some people, and it's really this idea of like, how can we attract more of the smartest minds um, to help with the exact kind of issues you're talking about? I mean, theirs is more specifically focused on national security issues, maybe more so than some of
Right.
the criminal elements, except that so many of the criminal elements have national security implications now. And
Yes.
I mean, there's just such a chance for asymmetric warfare, like such a small group with relatively low funding that don't own a Navy or an Air Force have the ability
Yes.
to have such an outsized impact in a negative way to people's everyday happiness and like you said, in a medical situation, their actual lives, right?
Oh, 100%. And vice versa. I mean, like most business owners don't worry day to day about protecting the land, sea, and air around them, right? They have local law enforcement or the Navy or the Air Force, like you said. But there's now this fourth domain of activity, which is the cyber domain. And the government, local, state, federal, has basically said you're on your own, right? Like, normally if you're the victim of a crime, you can call the police, or you can call the fire department or whatnot. I kind of imagine the police showing up after you report a cybercrime as being, an outtake from that Zoolander film. They put a couple bullets through your MacBook or your PC, and it's like the criminals are inside the computer. It just doesn't work like that. And so that's really the need that we're fulfilling, right? It's helping businesses understand the risk that they're taking.
So let's talk about your ideal client because I have actually been really nervous about this. We our commercial real estate fund, we're doing like really high profit margin things like in the Airbnb space, like really purpose built mini resorts for action sports families that are they're uncommon, they're cool, and so there's a high profit margin in it, right? And so you can imagine my investors call their friends and they're like, "Hey, this is awesome. We get this check every quarter, right?" And I have obviously to comply with all the securities laws about who I can sell my investment to. But then I have the problem of like, what if we get hacked? Like, like the Warren Buffett thing, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and one decision to lose it, right? Like, you know, some of these large family offices and people that we dealt with exceedingly high net worth, um, our reputation of like, oh, we lost your money because we didn't have cyber defense or things like this. Like, I really don't ever want to make that phone call. Like, it's really kept me up a lot. Um, Somebody like us, what do you have products that address us? Are we too small or who's your market?
No, look, I mean, there are almost no types of businesses that we do not serve. Like we give insurance to not for profits, to art galleries, museums, to churches, synagogues, like I mentioned, small businesses of all sorts, startups. We insure professional sports teams. I mentioned we insure a barbecue joint in Kansas City. Um, we insure publicly traded companies. And we have a program of cyber insurance for bouncy castle operators. So these are people who just operate bouncy castles as a business. They purchase insurance from us. And the reason for it is that everyone has this risk, right? Obviously there's all the hacker wearing hoodie types of risks, ransomware and data breaches and the like. But cyber insurance also broadly covers privacy liability. Well, name a business that isn't collecting personally identifiable information or payment card data or health information or the like. If that's lost for any reason, even if accidental, that's covered under a cyber insurance policy, as an example. If your technology just fails, right? Like you mentioned your fiber going down today. You're in a new location. if you have a business interruption loss, that's actually covered by cyber insurance, even though there's no criminals involved. And so cyber insurance is kind of broadly designed to cover the sorts of losses that an organization would have as they start to bring technology inside. And again, like it's hard to think of a single organization that isn't somehow using technology in a way in which if it didn't work wouldn't cause them some sort of hardship. So that's what we're here to ensure.
So,
So we can sell you a policy
excuse,
right
yeah,
here live, Jess. I mean, like, let's
okay.
just do it
Well,
live.
actually,
No
this is
teasing.
my thing. Excuse my ignorance. Is this similar to like when we go get general liability insurance for when somebody breaks their leg on our bike, jumps on our property? Like, we go in, then there's a quote that comes back, or what's the process like?
Yeah, it's similar, right? So it's like most small businesses today buy what's called a bot policy, like a business owner's policy. Or if you're a bit larger, you buy some sort of packaged insurance, which both of those are packaging together liability insurance with property insurance, right? And so they protect the things you own and they, protect this from stuff happening at your place of business and all the liability you have. The thing is like bot policies were, I think, created somewhere in like the 1980s for the risks that businesses had in the 1980s. Well, it turns out that businesses in 2022 look a lot different than they did back then. And I'd venture to say that cyber risk is now becoming a far more dominant risk than the property stuff. Most organizations don't even own much property, and yet they haven't really evolved. And so that's what's happening. Businesses are now either adding cyber insurance coverage to their bot policy, although the coverage there is still pretty weak. It's lagging. Or they go out and they purchase a standalone policy that's just dedicated to cover those types of risks. And oftentimes it's purchased through an insurance broker, right? Most businesses are using a broker. Occasionally you could buy online through some sort of online platform. Like for example, our products are available through Intuit QuickBooks as an example. So they're a partner of ours, and we have a number of others as well, in which whether through brokers or through these channel partners like Intuit, you can very easily and quickly in under 60 seconds purchase a cyber insurance policy.
And will you tell people about your free offering that we spoke about just for a second?
Yeah, yeah. Look, so like the mission of our company was to solve cyber risk, and a big part of that was like how do we democratize access to it, which is just sort of a fancy way of make it as close to free as humanly reasonably possible. And so I had the good fortune to be invited to the White House to meet with the president and a number of other leaders to talk about cybersecurity back in August of last year. And at that meeting, that summit, we announced that we were going to make our cyber risk platform that had only been available to our insurance customers available to anyone. Today, over 80,000 people are using that platform for free, like no cost. And again, it's not entirely free because you got to spend your time to use it. You got to spend your time to understand the problem. But we're trying to do as much as possible to make it easier for businesses of all sorts to protect themselves. So that product is called Coalition Control. Anyone can sign up with just a business email address at control.coalitioninc.com. And so, yeah, it's a great tool. It's the same tool that we provide to our insurance customers, and it's helped quite a few organizations avoid sort of obvious losses.
If I could shift gears here, thinking more about the idea of growing a business. Um, when you think about growing a business to a $5 billion valuation in 5 years, there's so many other folks, specifically in the insurance and taking the efficiencies of the internet, things like this, that would love to achieve something like that and aren't. What do you attribute your success to? Like, what have you done that others haven't?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's easy to try and distill the $5 billion into a sort of a 5-year success story, but I've definitely been going at this and learning how to build companies and for a considerably longer period of time, probably measured more in decades than years. And, like everyone, have had successes, have had failures. And, I think it goes back to just like, having humility, like really trying to learn from those successes, trying to equally learn, if not more, from the failures and distilling that into, building coalition. And as I think many repeat entrepreneurs will tell you, or repeat folks who've seen the high growth startup, it's a lot easier the second time. It's even easier the third time. And and so I think, look, a good part of the success is owing to that and want to be open. Had this been my first company, I'm not as confident that that maybe it would have grown quite as quickly as it did. It also just look, I think of like building a company as being having fewer ingredients than baking a cake, right? And not that I'm a master baker, but it's like what water, flour, eggs, I guess sugar if you want it to taste decent. In a company, it's like three ingredients. It's a good idea or ideas, and you have to continuously come up with them and innovate. It's capital and it's people. And people, by my imagination, over all of my years of experience, are by far the hardest part of that equation. And there's two parts of it. There's attracting talented people. And my philosophy there is pretty simple. It's stars attract stars, like talented people attract other talented people, purpose driven people attract other purpose driven people. So, like, really focus hard on the folks that you're going to go build your organization with, the values they embody, because they're going to attract people that look a lot like them, and that compounds, right? It's not just the financial aspects in a business that compound, it's the talent and it's the people that you have. Of course, once you have a bunch of talented people, it's, how do you get them to work together collaboratively towards a common end? And, we've talked a lot about the importance of that during this podcast. And that's really where culture comes in, right? It's, and I think you have to be deliberate. You have to write it down. But of course, that's not sufficient. It's culture is not what you write down, it's what you practice. But really having a strong culture is what can get a group of amazingly talented people to work together collaboratively.
For you, what does intentionally practicing it look like? Like, how do you get enough meaningful repetitions to build habits? Like, what does that actually look like for you guys? I'm guessing it's not just posters on a wall somewhere.
It's not just posters on a wall. No, I mean, a lot of it's been building them into like fun moments in the company where we recognize people. So, we had a whole mantra of like sweeping the floors. Like, no one's too big to do the small tasks that need to be done. And that's especially important in a startup where, whether you're like doing the dishes and turning them on so you don't have fruit flies flying around your office, or, working on the higher value add stuff, it's like everyone's got to chip in. And so we had at our weekly team meeting, we had this thing called the Golden Dustpan Award, where someone who just went above and beyond, like they got it. And then they got to recognize the next person. And it just blossomed into this like corporate wide talent contest where people got increasingly clever in terms of how they handed off the award. There was like videos, there was raps, there was haikus. It just got increasingly clever. The dustpan went from like just literally a Rubbermaid dustpan to someone had like a glittery gold coalition embossed logo. I mean, it got, very, and it became quite the honor. So that was one way. The
And,
other
and was that
was,
like at a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting that got passed on? Or what did that look like?
it was at a weekly meeting. Now it's at a biweekly meeting. And it's to this very day, like there has not been a single team wide meeting where we have not ended with that award. And, it's just a way to recognize someone. It's a way to like instill that particular cultural value and remind people about the others. We also instituted, we did an orientation, and we've done orientation even all the way down to when we were like 14 employees. Any new employee that came in, we'd have a group of people take them through it, even if there was only one person joining us. I still do that orientation to this very day. There's not a single person who's joined the company that hasn't gone through mine. And I spend a lot of time talking about why we built the company.
How big is the team now?
I think we're like almost 700, 700.
And so for you, there's so many demands on your time. What is
Yeah.
it about that you came to the conclusion, nope, this is something that I want to do personally?
Look, there's no better moment than when someone's joining the company to really make an impact on them and to like really, make sure that the course that they're on is the right one. They're excited about joining. They're ready to go. Like they have a fresh set of eyes, so they can see things that perhaps some of us can't. And so it's a really an opportunity for me to like really instill that culture, uh, open the door to where if you see something that isn't working as it should be, don't assume that we just wanted to do something in a suboptimal way for the fun of it. To let us know, tell me like, I'm accessible to everyone in the company. I report to everyone is kind of the way I see my job as the CEO. And so that's why I think it's so incredibly important to do that. So yeah, building culture is like a big part of my job. Talent is a big part of my job. And I remember in the early days of Coalition, I had an investor ask me what percentage of my time I spent team building, like recruiting. And I said probably half of it. And he told me that was low. He's like, I would have expected you to have spent 80% of your time doing that. And you know what? He was right. Like he was absolutely right.
So there's a lot of people who will be shocked to hear that number. Why do you feel that number is right?
Well, I think it goes back to those three ingredients, right? It's like People is like the most important aspect of building a successful and enduring company. And you have to get it right. And especially in the early days, you don't have like a lot of room to make errors. Like, 700 people, you can make a mistake and you'll likely survive it. Maybe it'll be painful depending on how critical that role is, et cetera. But, when you're 7 people in a room, you're 14 people in a room, building a company, even one mishire can be really difficult and sidetrack you for a long time. And it's difficult to take action on those things as well. So that I think that's why that investor mentioned it. It's like nothing, no great idea, no great company comes from one single individual. It comes from a high functioning team. And so spend your time building one is I think the message that I received loud and clear.
I got to tell you, this came up in my interview yesterday with Samara Cohen from BlackRock, right? Uh, I think when I started in investing, kind of like 2004-ish, I thought of people a little more like replaceable parts in the equation. And like as time goes on, I just continually get converted further and further to everything you're saying of like this idea of like, the example I used with her yesterday is like the most elite classified units of the special ops teams, you know, uh, those guys, it's not about the equipment. You know what I mean? My
Yeah.
example to her was like, you could throw them out of a plane, they lose all their equipment except the big pen, and they're still going to accomplish their mission. You know,
Yeah.
and she completely agrees with you, by the way, and that's how she sees her ability to run $6 trillion in assets under management. Okay, and her line was this because she had done a lot of theater and theater production before getting into finance, and she said 95% of good directing, 95% of being a good director is good casting. I
Yeah.
thought it was a great analogy.
I believe it. Yeah. Well, and look, and to be fair to you, I think there was once upon a time in like corporate America where maybe people were more expendable parts, right? And the predominant organizational design at that time was like a very large hierarchical organization. You have these companies with, 30, 40,000 employees. The people at the bottom, like literally, you did not want them to think because it would just be chaos. Like it had to be, more robotic. But then the internet came along, the 24/7 news cycle, the speed and pace of things just increased dramatically. The data and information available to people to compete, you had to move a lot faster. And it turned out that hierarchical structure was very fragile. And as a result, like there's a lot of companies that during my childhood I thought would always exist. Like they don't exist anymore, right? They're gone by the wayside. And so, certainly the new way to build a company is to keep it as flat as you possibly can. It's to actually encourage all of your employees to think and make sure that they have the framework and the data to be able to do that well. We talk a lot in Coalition about pushing information to the edge of the company, where I want everyone at the edge of every part of our business to know exactly what's going on, to be able to measure how well they're doing things so that they can adopt and adjust and make decisions, faster and more autonomously than waiting for, someone many rungs removed who can't see the problem to all of a sudden realize that something in the financial statements doesn't look right. And so let's make some crazy course correction. That's where I think, people now are like a far more critical aspect in empowering them, right? That's equally important.
So let's talk about clients for a minute. When you think about attracting new clients, what's your mindset when it comes to the mix of marketing versus sales versus just influencing in general? What's kind of your philosophy for new client acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're like a super product focused organization. And by that, I mean, it's like, look, insurance sucks. Like, let's be blunt about it. Hopefully the audience here is of a certain age. I'll keep it PG-13, but it's awful, right? You buy an insurance policy, you stick it on a shelf, it collects dust, and you hope to never use it again. Many people never do. They never get any value from it. But of course, you can get immense value if something bad happens. We wanted to improve that. And that was a big part of this push for active insurance. Yes, of course, you can transfer your risk. And when something bad happens, we'll pay the claim just like a traditional insurance policy. But we do so much more. Like we'll actually help you prevent the loss from happening in the first place, which let's be honest, no one wants to file a claim. They'd much rather avoid the loss if they could. So we help them do that. And then in the instance that they do have a loss and they have no one to turn to, literally no one, not the police, not the fire department, we are the bat phone. Like they can call us, we will help them. We will help them recover operationally, which is what they want far more than the check at the end of the day. And so, if you can just build a great product that people can understand and that helps them, it's like 9/10 the battle. Then yes, of course, once you've got that, the hard problem is you have to educate people. Like it's an education problem. A lot of people, maybe you, like weren't aware that this product even existed before we spoke, or that there was anything different than just this awful traditional insurance product. And that's where it's a combination of marketing, of course, to go out and tell that message, and sales, right? Which is our model is very much driven through a channel, insurance brokers. And so we want to go educate those brokers so then they can then go and educate their clients. Sort of the whole concept of teaching someone to fish. That's what we're doing by both that sales strategy and then increasingly a marketing strategy to help really create a new category of insurance is maybe the way I would put it. In the same way that, the smartwatch is a different category than the watch, right? It's like an Apple iWatch will tell you the time and the date, but it'll check your blood oxygen level. It'll notify the emergency services if you have a hard fall. It has this incredible amount of computational power attached to it. And that's the same thing with our policy. It's an insurance policy with an incredible form of computational power that does things you would never have expected a watch or much less an insurance company to do, depending on which analogy I'm picking.
So, can you give me an example? Can you tell me about a story of how you're educating your channel partners and kind of winning that mind share from these brokers or maybe some other insurance companies or are not?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'll give you a great example. I mean, so we have insurance brokers that place their customers' business with us. We had one that was actually just across the Bay Bridge here from where I'm at in Oakland. It was a law firm. And someone in that law firm opened an email and clicked on an attachment that they shouldn't have. And of course, we all know how that story ends. Like they download malware onto their computer. It gives remote access to a Russian organized criminal group. And it's sort of a matter of time before that turns into a very devastating ransomware loss. Well, we collect so much information. We're tracking the activities of these threat groups that we detected the infection. We detected that there had been a malware detonation inside our policyholders' network, and we sent them an alert within 15 minutes of that. Within an hour, we had worked with their director of information technology to pull that infected machine out of their network, to clean it up, to solve the issue, add multi-factor authentication and the like on the box, and, turned a breach, like what was actually a breach, we contained it into something very small, and avoided a very large ransomware loss. The broker, by the way, was copied into all of those communications. Imagine if you're an insurance broker, or the policyholder, and it's your insurance company that reaches out to tell you that someone has downloaded malware. In fact, the director of IT, after all the dust settled, he sends us a one-line email that says, "I forgot to ask, how did you find this out?" And it's just like, the kind of the mind-blowing moment where your insurance company is providing that level of protection. Now, when you do that repeatedly and a broker sees that, and of course, a broker sees that all the traditional incumbent insurance companies they're working with don't do anything remotely like that, like they're converted. Not only do they place it for all of their clients, they buy it themselves. And so we insure a staggering number of the insurance agencies and brokers that actually sell our product. They become literally our best customers, our best clients, and they can go out to their clients and attest that they use the product as well. So it's kind of just, again, solve a problem, do it well. And then over the course of time, people will take notice you're doing something dramatically different and the rest just sorts itself out.
Can I distill it down my way and then you correct me?
Please. Yeah, of course.
As you're talking, I'm a big fan of Seth Godin, the marketing writer. You probably know books like Tribes
I've
and
heard of
stuff.
Seth. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and my favorite speech he ever gave was the Nordic Business Forum I think he was in Sweden or Norway. I can't remember where. And he talks about this idea that like basically marketers abused the audiences and crammed ads down their throats for so long that as soon as customers had a choice, they chose to opt out. Look at pop-up blockers, look at all the things.
Yep.
I pay for YouTube Premium, so I don't have to sit through all those ads. Right? Like and essentially, um, what he's saying is that like in his opinion, um, the best kind of marketing you can do is have a better product. And he says that the marketing becomes the product. And what I'm hearing from you is like a real embracing of that, of like over over index on attracting the kind of people that could create the kind of product that creates its own category. So we're hard to compete with because we're kind of like category king by default because we invented the category. And then if it actually is what we claim it is, that results in great stories that we then share about this the product. And it's not a bunch of puffery. It's not a bunch of fluff. It's like stories about what we did that is on another level. How would you say it better
I,
than
I,
that?
th- I look, I don't know that I could say it better than that. I mean, and like, I think Cloudflare, by the way, took a very similar approach. Like in both companies, we didn't have a single marketing person for years. Like Coalition didn't even have a marketing function like 3 years into the journey. Um, and look, that was a badge of honor up until the point where it's a badge of shame, where it's like just so many more people need to hear about this story. And so once we did start building a marketing organization, it was really focused, to your point, far more on product marketing. Our CMO is a world class product marketer. Most of those came out of Salesforce. Where Benioff, of course, is the master of masters. And, that's where it came down to like, how do we articulate this vision of the future that, hey, this isn't traditional insurance. This is a new category of insurance. It makes it a lot easier for people to understand the value add of your product and really, really latch onto it. And it just reinforces itself. So you said it perfectly. I've just now added 2 minutes to say that even further.
Well, okay. Can I switch gears again?
Yeah, of course.
So, I was at a lunch yesterday with the police department, and
Hmm.
that is going to be taking our new training in child rescue. So we've got a former intelligence officer who has
Hmm.
agreed to teach an unclassified course on how to help cops recruit high level sources in criminal networks that are trafficking children. Okay. So it's not like a one and done bust. This is like, how do we recruit an agent in place that can turn into busts for years? Somebody so high up, they know where all the money goes and comes from and goes to, and
Right.
kind of thing, right? And they're really excited to get that level of human intelligence training because they just most PDs just don't get that level of training, right?
Right.
And
Right.
we're actually are right now we're actually fundraising. We're actually going to be giving departments 10 grand so they can actually afford to pay for a source like this, right? You know, that's very welcomed, right?
Yep.
From there. But what it quickly turned into was talking about their lack of cyber skills and how he just got a grant finally because they realized how far behind they are and these kind of things. And he got a grant. They're trying to get some trainings and some equipment, some of this stuff. And I started talking to them about the idea of social engineering. And,
Right.
it's like oftentimes, this is my opinion, feel free to disagree with me, but like oftentimes the quickest way to hack a system is to hack the human. Like,
Of
you
course.
know,
Yeah.
you don't need to have an advanced computer degree from MIT if you can just get the secretary to turn her head away while you use your iPhone and take a picture of the password she wrote on a Post-it note that's stuck to her computer screen,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or learn enough acronyms and lingo to sound like an insider and call up and pretend to be the IT guy, right?
Hmm. You're
Um,
absolutely right.
s- so that's my like very limited explanation of social engineering. How would you describe it better for people who haven't thought about training their staff and being aware of, uh, you know, criminal organization trying to hack the human instead of hack the ones and zeros?
Yeah, I mean, look, and I would say it's almost always hacking the human. That's typically where this starts. And so, if you look at the three most common claims that we have, they're business email compromise claims, where someone's typically been tricked or socially engineered into giving their password to whatever account has been compromised. It's social engineering, or we call funds transfer fraud, where someone's been sent an email or someone's email's been hacked and that hacked email is used to defraud someone else. Or, there's a fake invoice or a phone call even, right? To convince someone There's even SMS messages, right? Who in this day and age hasn't gotten an SMS purportedly from their boss asking them to go buy some gift cards? And, people will do that. People will go buy gift cards, and the second they give those numbers, like, the money's gone. So it's high. The third is ransomware, right? And ransomware oftentimes, again, stems from some sort of human error, in many cases. But social engineering is the dominant thing. Like, look, criminals are lazy. They're not going to expend enormous resources to hack someone if they don't have to. And the same goes for nation states, right? Like, I've spoken to many a CEO of a Fortune 500 business and even the CISOs. And it's like, look, you have to focus on things like email. You have to focus on the basics. And it's like, oh, it's just email, this phishing, all this. And it's like sophisticated actors don't use sophisticated tools if they don't have to. I would phrase your statement. The example I give is if I can give your employee a $20 Starbucks gift card and they'll give me their password in exchange, like, why do we need to use some 0-day exploit that we've spent millions of dollars acquiring or developing? Um, and so you're spot on. Social engineering, one of the biggest threats our customers face. Uh, Criminals are smart and they target particular industries, especially hard. So look, anyone involved in real estate, like you are, target of choice for these criminals because big dollar transactions, multiple parties involved. And so if you can manage to get access to that title agent's email or the realtor's email, all of a sudden you can do some pretty egregious damage, right? You can tell people, hey, this is where to wire your money. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen a homeowner wire their life savings to a bank account that was not the one that they should have. And so these things can absolutely be devastating for businesses. Same goes for invoices, and it even hits big companies. I mean, Facebook famously paid over $100 million to a criminal who had faked an invoice from Quanta Computer Corporation. Now, I think they managed to recover quite a bit of it, but I mean, it's what an incredible loss, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Listen, this has been great. Thanks for spending so much time here today. What
Of course.
what
Yeah.
did we not cover? What do you want to leave with?
Look, we covered a lot of ground. I think for me, it's just it's that educational thing of making sure that anyone who's listening, it's like every organization, and we see this every day, right, through claims. Cyber risks are growing, and many businesses are self-insuring. Like everyone has cyber insurance is kind of one of the comments I make. You either buy it from a third party or you're insuring yourself. Just recognize that, right? Because it's on your balance sheet at this point. And, that's where it's like, you can work with any company, not just ours, to help with that and make the right decision. But, we see this impacting not for profits, small businesses, large organizations. It's a topic that I think it's in every boardroom. So I just sort of leave it with that. Like, this is a risk management problem, not just a technology problem. You can't just, add MFA. You can't, these are all things that help. But, at the end of the day, they only mitigate risk. They don't eliminate it. Um, so yeah, but otherwise, it's been great just to be on the program and incredible the groups of people you interview. So I'm humbled to be in their company.
Thanks again for doing this.
Yeah, take care.